This is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to this episode of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon, or should I call it the Daily Show with Mitch Lafon? Yes, it is Mitch Marathon Month, where I am trying to clean out the closet of interviews that have been accumulating, and I have to say I am not. I'm not being successful. Yesterday, I put up one interview. And I did 3. So I got to clean out the closet by going into a -2 kind of situation. Anyway, listen, I have got interviews for you, including today's with Little Steven, Carl Palmer, Alan Parsons, David Freiberg, Janet Gardner, FM's Steve Overland, producer David Prater, Dave Amato, who plays with REO Speedwagon, Sherry Curry, Gary Peel. I was going to say Phil, but Gary Peel of Boston. And, and I have got a terrific one for you. If you listened to the Ted Nugent episode, Ted said, "Hey man, we should get Tom Werman on the phone and we should talk about him." And I went, okay. I can do that. So I phoned Tom and I said, listen, Ted wants to do a chat with a producer anyway. So Ted phones me on a scheduled time on earlier this week, and I connect Tom. And it's funny because at the beginning, you know, Ted starts off being Ted, and Tom's like, "Oh, this is a joke. It's not the real guy." It's like, no, it's the real Ted, my friend. And they ended up spending, I'm trying to think, it was about 55 minutes on the phone just talking about all the albums they worked on together and reminiscing about the good old days. So I have Ted Nugent and producer Tom Werman talking music, and they'll have to confirm this, but I got a feeling that they hadn't spoken in, you know, a good 10 or 15 years. Now, I could be wrong. I didn't ask them specifically, have you spoken in 10 or 15, but I had a feeling that it's been a long, long time since they've spoken, so I've got that for you. Now, today, I have got the one and only Little Steven, and he is out on the road in Quebec here on July 6th and in Montreal on July 8th, and if you haven't gone to any of his shows, or if you don't have tickets, do get those now. And he's got a new album out called Summer of Sorcery, featuring the Disciples of Soul, but Summer of Sorcery, first album of original music in 20 years. And during the interview, he tells you why and what got him motivated to make music again. So do listen for that. It's a great chat. It's a short chat. We had 15. We went a little bit over. And anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing his show on July 8th. Now, I am recording these talk-ups and putting this up on July 4th of 2019. So to all my American friends, fans, supporters, followers, happy 4th of July. And as you know, love your country. I love the States. You know, the States are great. If I could move and live in San Diego, I would. Birthplace of some of the greatest rock and roll, whether it's Alice Cooper or Kiss or Aerosmith or any of those bands. Well, listen, a lot of the bands I listen to are American. I do love my Thunder and my Def Leppard and my Sabbath and the UK stuff, but the States, man, Cheap Trick, right? You got to love that. Yesterday I saw Buck Cherry in Montreal. Love them. So just thank you to all my American friends, fans, supporters, listeners. Happy 4th of July. And listen, if you're not listening to this on the 4th of July, well, happy whatever random day you're listening to this on, I guess. Does Hallmark make a card for that, by the way? Happy random day. And if you're not listening to this in 2019, happy whatever year you're listening to this in. Anyway, let us get on to Little Steven. Just an absolute great chat and a great thrill to speak with him. when I started off doing the rock reporting thing, it was for a magazine out of Toronto, and it was always heavy metal. It was death metal, heavy metal. And I got known in Montreal as the heavy metal guy. But in my heart, I've never been a heavy metal guy. I love heavy metal. I love my Judas Priest and my Iron Maiden and my Megadeth and my Metallica in particular. But I've always just been a music guy. I could listen to the Black Album, followed by listening to Rio by Duran Duran. I could be in a car and be able to appreciate, a Madonna song on the radio. So I've always just been a music fan, and I love the fact now that since I'm doing this alone and all by myself, that I can stretch out and I can do Little Steven and I can do Mickey Curry and I can do Jim Kerr of Simple Minds and Boy George, and then of course do the Kiss guys and the Aerosmith guys and Kirk Hammett and Metallica. Anyway, I hope that the fans out there are appreciating the diversity. I'm not sure many other shows will give you Warrant one week and Melissa Etheridge the next, or as is the case during Mitch Marathon Month, Melissa Etheridge on Monday and Warrant on Tuesday. But anyway, listen, for the rest of July, I've got a couple more interviews scheduled with George Thorogood amongst them and Ghost, the band Ghost. But I think I'm going to have to hang up the microphone and just concentrate on getting all these episodes that are sitting in the can out and get them to you. But anyway, here is, without further ado, the man who has probably the album of the year, or certainly top 10 consideration, well, actually top 5 consideration, Summer of Sorcery. It is the one, the only, Little Steven. We are speaking with Stevie Van Zandt. Of course, the new album is Summer of Sorcery. And Stevie, I have to say, I put on my socials yesterday that I was going to talk to you, and this one fan wrote in and said, if Summer of Sorcery is not the album of 2019, I don't know what is. There is an absolute love for this album. So, right? I mean, it's a great album. So talk to me just about putting it together and the importance of making new music, because in your career, as it is, you could go out there, put your name on the marquee and go play a show. And here in Quebec on July 6th at the Festival d'été de Québec and on July 8th at the Olympia in Montreal, you could go play those shows and you could stitch together a greatest hits. And, right? Talk to me about
yeah. I came back into this really by accident. Very quickly, 2016, I'm in London at the end of the E Street Band Tour, and a friend, a local promoter, says, when are you coming back from London? I said, well, me and my wife are coming back for Bill Wyman's birthday, the original bass player in the Rolling Stones. And he said, well, that happens to be the same week as my blues festival. Why don't you throw a band together and play it? So, I said, wow, I haven't done that in, 25 years. It sounded like fun. So that's what I did. And so by pure accident, by pure circumstance, I get reconnected with my own music after 20 years. I put together a bunch of, some blues songs, some Paul Butterfield, some Electric Flag. And then I did about a dozen of my own songs. And I was very surprised. It was kind of a revelation to rediscover this stuff, because it's kind of unique. And I realized, this rock meets soul thing that I was into really remained unique. It was different back then, and it's different now. And it just seemed to have a value that I thought was worth, really taking another look at. So we decided to do the Soulfire album. I wasn't ready to write a whole new album after all this time, so I did an album of songs I'd written for other people. That's what the Soulfire album was exactly 2 years ago. And that was fun, so we decided to tour with that. And, Bruce is on Broadway, so, I didn't have a new TV show at the time. So I said, you know what, let me take a couple of years here and reconnect with my own music. And so the Soulfire tour was extremely important. And the fact that this band stayed together these are the most requested New York session guys in the world. I mean, they're unbelievably good, as you're going to see when you see the show. And they stayed loyal to me this whole time, and ended up, not only doing the Soulfire album and Soulfire tour, resulting in that huge 7-album live Soulfire box set, but also the new Summer of Sorcery album. So it's the first time in my life I've ever done 2 records in a row with the same band. And about halfway through the Soulfire tour, reabsorbing my stuff, night after night, slowly some new ideas came. I said, wow, if I'm going to get back into this, I do want to do something different, though. I don't want to be political anymore, and I don't want to be autobiographical anymore. I've done that, and it just doesn't feel relevant right now. I want to do an album of fiction, and 12 little movies. I could be a different character in each. And because we're in such a dark time politically, I thought, what we really need, if I can do it, I want to do something that's hopeful and optimistic and a little bit of light here in the darkness. And, let's do a summer album, and let's try and recall those feelings that when we first discover summer, that wonderful feeling of unlimited possibilities and the thrill of just, school is out, and here comes summer, and falling in love with life and falling in love with love. I wanted to just recapture that and provide a little light right now in the darkness. So, that's what happened.
And you've done it so well. It is such a fun album, and yes, of course, school's out. Nothing says summer like that Alice Cooper song. Just real quick, though, talk to me about promoting new music in this day and age. In the old days, or in the 70s and 80s, you had the album, and you had the album cycle tour and radio. And now with YouTube and Spotify and music sort of just being everywhere, it's sometimes hard to find an artist. What are some of the challenges you face in getting the word out on a new album and promoting new music?
Yeah, it is a challenge, mostly because, as you say, it's so. The modern technology has made it possible for everybody to be their own record company and their own radio station and everything else. So we have more music in the atmosphere than ever before, and so the marketing challenges are the same as they always were, maybe, and even more challenging now, to kind of cut through, this vast amount of music being made. So all you can do is, do all the interviews you can and the usual stuff. I'm lucky. I'm with Universal, which is a big record company, and they've been a lot of help. And luckily, I have my own radio station, so I don't have to worry too much about radio airplay. I mean, my radio station's in 100 countries, and 24/7 on Sirius satellite as well. So I got my own radio kind of covered, but it's tough, and going out with the band has been like starting from the beginning. Doesn't matter how much success you have with the E Street Band or with Sopranos or with Lilyhammer or with the Underground Garage or anything else. When you go out to play live, it's starting from the beginning, man. And, so you have to adjust to that. And when you're doing something this important and this sort of new for people, because most of the people coming to my shows are coming out of curiosity. They don't really know very many of the songs. And we have to win them over song by song, which we do with this fantastic band. But you got to face that reality. The success you have in one area does not necessarily translate to any success in another area. My Lilyhammer show in Norway, 1/5 of the population watched that show every week. Over 1 million people. It's a country of 5 million. And over 1 million people watch that show every week, and yet I go to Oslo and I play a club. I play 1,000 people in a club. So, one success does not necessarily translate to another success, and so you have to adjust to that and realize, as far as live performance, you're kind of starting all over again.
Yeah, you really are. And by the way, Underground Garage is terrific. In fact, consider this my audition for a slot on the channel. But speaking of Underground Garage, you've had a chance to work with an artist who in North America is somewhat underground, and that is, of course, Michael Monroe of Hanoi Rocks. You did you were part of the Not Faking It album and also Demolition 23. Just if you could talk to me about the Demolition 23 project, but also Michael Monroe, and what is it about North America that we just didn't get him, because he's such a rock and roll guy. I mean, he's it, right?
Yeah, no, he's one of the legends of rock and roll at this point. He's had the Song of the Year several times in the Underground Garage, so the Underground Garage audience knows him very well. I don't know, when it comes to why someone is a success and why someone isn't, usually comes down to management, to be honest. And, so Hanoi Rocks probably had the wrong management at the time. Who knows? But I met him, Steve Baders introduced me to him, and we just got along right away. I really dug his whole energy. And he's still absolutely insane. I mean, he's one of the great performers of all time to this day. He was starting to do solo records because his drummer had died. The Hanoi Rocks drummer Razzle had died in a tragic car accident with the Motley Crue singer.
Yeah, Vince Neil.
Yeah, which was just a horrible accident. And it was so depressing for Michael that they actually broke up the band. And so he's doing a couple of solo things, and I wrote a couple of things for him, co-wrote a couple of things, and then we decided, let's do a classic punk album. And so we took Sammy, the bass player from Hanoi Rocks, and a great drummer we found, and a fantastic young guitar player. And we did the Demolition 23 album, which is one of my favorite albums of all time, which I have got to re-release. It hasn't been really available, and I gotta get that re-released because it's one of my favorites, some of my favorite songs I've ever written. And we took it around to record companies, and they said, no, punk is over, and it's not coming back. And then, 6 months later, Green Day happens, and Offspring, all these, these new punk bands all of a sudden started popping up all over the place. But anyway, we got rejected, so we put it out on my own label, which, didn't have any distribution at the time, and nobody really heard it. It's a shame. And like I said, I got to get it back out. But it's a classic punk album in the Ramones, Pistols, tradition. And we to this day, it's just some of my favorite stuff. So. And he continues to make records and great ones. Like I say, I think last year he had the Song of the Year in the Underground Garage voting at the end of the year. People vote, so he's he's hanging in there, and he became a TV star locally. I think he was the host of some TV show like I don't know, one of those The Voice or American Idol type shows, which is kind of hilarious when you think of Michael doing a straight job. But I think he became quite popular as a local TV show person, in Finland,
Yeah, well, he's doing great. Now, I know we only have 15 minutes, so I'm just going to move along here. But now that Summer of Sorcery is out and you're playing these shows, is it sort of the beginning of the next phase of doing more new original music? Or is it, okay, it's been done, and now I'm going to go back to acting, and now I'm going to go back to Bruce? How do you sort of see it?
Really, I think so far it was the end. That was just the end chapter of that book, and Summer of Sorcery is the first chapter of a whole new book. It really does feel that way to me, because it's such a major artistic breakthrough for me to break out of that. Like I said, doing nothing but autobiographical political music. And I wasn't sure I could do it. I wasn't sure I could write songs for myself the way I write songs for other people. And now that I know I can do it, it really is a whole new rebirth for me. So I'm going to find a way to keep this type of a soul together and continue to work with the East Street Band. Of course, we'll see what Bruce wants to do at the end of this year, if he wants to go out next year or not. And then I'll, try and squeeze a TV show in there in between somehow. I don't know how, but, that requires about 6 months that I can't find at the moment. But, I want to keep both bands going, obviously. And so this is very much the beginning.
Good, and I know fans are going to be looking forward to it, to more music actually. And then just real quick here, the Underground Garage. Talk to me about sort of the concept and the importance of that channel, because you feature a lot of music that gets forgotten or gets looked over, and to me, it's an essential service that you're providing. So just to quickly talk about the success of that channel.
Well, as radio, evolved, if you can call it an evolution. Devolved is probably a better, description. But as radio changed through the years, I realized that they began to have categories for everything except rock and roll. And that sounds weird, but it's true. Traditional rock and roll really does not have a format. You can find blues on the radio easier, or jazz, and I thought that was weird. And I thought, the Renaissance music, and I consider the 60s a Renaissance period because the greatest art being made was also the most commercial, and we won't see that for a couple hundred years. The Renaissance music was basically disappearing. You couldn't hear... I never thought the day would come that I would be the only one playing the Beatles on the radio, but that's what it's coming to. And I thought, man, we need a new format here. So I decided I'm going to do a format with essentially the British invasion and the 60s at the center of it. So I'm going to play everything that influenced the British invasion and everything the British invasion has influenced. As a way of connecting the dots. And that means, you're going to include blues and soul and R&B. We go back to 1951 and all the way up to modern day. We also play, of course, new bands. We've introduced over 1,000 new bands in 17 years. And so you put all of that stuff together, and people have said, of course, you can't do that. You can't mix up genres. You can't mix up eras. You can't put all that together. I said, yes, you can, if it's the right songs. And we play all 60 years and coming up to 70 years of rock and roll now, which is an incredible period of time when you think about it. 70 years of being relevant. You can still hear the influence of the greatest blues and rock and roll in the music of today. I mean, it's diluted, obviously, quite a bit, but it's still kind of there, and it still is modern. All modern music really directly comes from this stuff, And if you go back 70 years before the 60s, you're not going to hear much of that, whatever they were playing, in 1880 or 1870, so it's a remarkable lifespan.
Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, there you are.
I lose you?
Yeah, you lost me for a second, but there you are.
Yeah. I was just saying, it's an incredible, this umbrella we call rock and roll has been, remaining relevant somehow. Anyway, so I just wanted to make sure the best music in the world was going to be on the radio and accessible to future generations. And that was the impetus of the radio format.
And it's a great format. Now I know we ran over our 15 minutes, so I want to thank you.
That's okay.
And I'll just remind the folks that July 6th at the Festival d'été du Québec in Quebec City, July 8th at the Olympia, and hopefully Universal will approve my tickets because I do want to come and check this out. So Stephen.
No. You don't need Universal. You be my guest.
Thank you.
We will we'll take care of you. And anybody you want to bring, please come back and say hello.
Would love to come out with my wife if that's possible. And thank you. And thank you for today. And I look forward to the July 8th show. And of course, folks, Summer of Sorcery is the album of 2019. It's only July, but I'm declaring it early. Stephen, as we say here, merci. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Cheers. Cheers. See you July 8th.
Right.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Rock Talk.